with me this morning is Senator Kip Bateman from the 16th Legislative District, Assemblywoman Donna from the 16th Legislative District, and the Assembly Republican leader John Bramnick, who represents the 21st District. In civilized society and in our community, courthouses are judicial buildings that serve a very, very important role and fulfill a very, very practical purpose. There's a reason why courthouses are very conspicuous in their location and their architecture. They are, to be said another way, very, very prominent buildings, and there's a reason for that. They symbolize ideals that are uniquely and distinctly American. And on this day, three ideals that come to mind are a nation of laws, the rule of law, and a just legal system. The legal system will never ever be perfectly perfect. It is the job of legislators to work toward perfection. And in this particular courthouse, back in July, an imperfection in our state statutes emerged. There was a court case held here, specific to a New Jersey statute that says, if you know you have AIDS, if you know that you are HIV positive, and you engage in sexual activity with an unsuspecting partner, you can be charged with a third-degree crime. The prosecution was not successful in prosecuting that case. The primary reason being is here in the state of New Jersey, prosecutors, the law enforcement community, does not have access to one's medical records unless they are charged with a first-degree crime. Therein lies the inadvertent loophole in our state statute, and therein lies the reason for our press conference today. Therein lies the reason for our introduction of Assembly Bill A-4380, which Senator Kip Bateman has also introduced in the state Senate. We feel very strongly that it is our job as legislators to give prosecutors the wherewithal they need to prosecute cases and ensure that justice is served. For the people who've been victimized by this individual who was charged with a third-degree crime, for which we were not successful in prosecuting the case back in July, the case is being appealed, so it is at the appellate level here in New Jersey. But it should not have gone that far. So again, our purpose here today is to speak to a bill that closes a loophole that will allow the prosecution access to one's medical records specific to this kind of third-degree crime. And with that, I invite my colleagues to offer a few comments if they so choose. Senator Bateman?
Assemblyman, thank you very much, and let me thank Jack. Jack was really the lead on this very important issue. This is common sense legislation, which closes a loophole. Right now, county prosecutors' hands are tied. Without this legislation, they couldn't prosecute the individuals in question. And so this makes a lot of sense. Other states have it. New York State has it. Canada has it. So I don't see how this could not go through the Senate and Assembly very rapidly. In the Senate, it's S-2979, and as soon as we get back in session, I'm going to ask the chairman of the Senate Judiciary to post this bill for a hearing, because it's so very important. We have a couple of the victims that we've spoken to. They have actually it was very difficult for them to step up, and now to become not victims but advocates of this. And it's important to get this passed so we can prevent it from happening in the future. Jack, I thank you for taking the lead of this. I thank Donna for her involvement. I think Assemblywoman decided about the safety rules.
Good morning. I also want to thank my colleague, Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, for taking the lead on this incredibly vital issue, and thank you to Senator Bateman for taking it to the Senate, and appreciate tremendously for our Republican Assembly leader being here this morning, and all of you. In our court system, the accused has a right to hear all the evidence presented at their trial. Certainly, the victims in this case should have an equal right to be informed of all the relevant information. I am personally shocked and disgusted that a person could act in such a heinous manner, possibly infecting other human beings with HIV, a deadly disease. Not sharing this vital information with another person for their consideration is reprehensible and criminal. This legislation that we are prime sponsoring respects due process and simply closes a glaring loophole, allowing the prosecutors justifiable access to such critical evidence that is vital to prove innocence or guilt. And this is something that is an obvious remedy for something that will give the tools to the prosecutor during this trial and the appeal. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. I'm John Bramnick, and I'm an Assembly Republican leader, but I'm also a trial lawyer. It seems absolutely absurd that someone commits a crime and the prosecutor can't get the records to demonstrate that the defendant was infected with AIDS because of some loophole that we've created in Trenton. So this is really simple. It allows the prosecutor to get the records to prove that the defendant had AIDS or was infected at the time. How do we have a law that prohibits the prosecutor from prosecuting a case? As a trial lawyer, I know this is fair, and I believe even the criminal defense bar would think it's fair. So I compliment Assemblyman Ciattarelli and Senator Bateman, as well as Assemblywoman Simon, for recognizing mistake and moving forward. And I thank them for their leadership.
A couple of comments before we take questions. We see this as a bipartisan matter, bipartisan issue, bipartisan bill. A number of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle were personally approached last week when we had an assembly session. I do anticipate there being Democratic co-signers on the bill. I am one who believes that the press is the fourth branch of government. How this issue came to light is the Courier News reporting on this issue back in mid-July after the case was concluded in the courthouse behind us. And so working with the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office in understanding the case and understanding the specific loophole that gave cause for the bench's decision is what got us here today. So I like very much when legislation that's proposed by legislators comes with help from the front lines, people that actually experience what's going on day to day in our courtrooms and in the community. We'd be happy to answer any questions. David?
Jack, could you, this is sort of a very obvious question, but could you explain if this law is passed, what will it allow prosecutors to do and how will that impact these kinds of cases?
Very specific, and let us reiterate. It is a third-degree crime in New Jersey. It's a state statute. If you know you have AIDS, or you know that you are HIV positive, and you engage in sexual activity with an unsuspecting party, you could be charged with a third-degree crime. Closing this loophole with this legislation would allow the prosecution, if they charge you with that third-degree crime, it would allow them to gain access to medical records. And in so doing, we believe, give them the wherewithal to not only prosecute that case, but be successful in winning that case.
Give me y'all's background and to let us know how this process goes when you propose bills. Was it not seen that there needed to be a first-degree crime when this bill was proposed in the first place? I mean, how does this work?
I can't speak to the genesis of the statutes. I'm not a lawyer, and my legislative tenure hasn't been that long. I do believe it was an inadvertent oversight when this statute was enacted. And when I say statute, what I mean is the statute specific to the AIDS and HIV epidemic. As we all know, that seemed to burst onto the scene suddenly. It's 30 years ago or so. In the 80s. And a great many statutes came on the books, as they should have. But as we always learn through case law, and certainly the leader can speak to this better than I, case law teaches us something. The case law here in Somerset County in July, with this particular case, taught us something. There was a loophole when that statute was enacted. Not only should it be a third-degree crime, medical records should also be accessible by the prosecution.
It's not uncommon for the legislature to go back and correct flaws in statutes. I mean, it's unfortunately it's a common theme. When you sit down and draft legislation, you think that you cover all aspects of it. Many times we find out that there are problems, and we have to go back and correct it. So that's this situation. This is obviously a loophole that needs to be corrected as soon as possible.
I'm going to try to break this down very simply. If you're a prosecutor, in order to prove this crime, this third-degree crime, you have to show that the person who committed crime had AIDS or was infected. How are you going to do that without the records? So the defense bar used a statute to protect the privacy of people, to basically defend a criminal, and the defense bar did it effectively because of a loophole in the statute. With respect to expungement, it's my understanding, and Senator Jack Ciattarelli indicated, that this third-degree crime, if you are convicted, cannot be expunged. Only certain crimes can be expunged in New Jersey.
It really makes no sense to have this statute on the books because you can't prove your case. That's the problem.
Yes, I want to make clear before the next question that in no way, shape, or form are any of the four of us, least of all me, passing judgment on the competency of our prosecutor's office here in Somerset County. They did their job. But Leader Bramnick brought to light how it was the defense won the case.
If this amendment does pass, and I assume it will,
In speaking with the victims, it was important to them that moving forward, they can protect other people. So that was
As
very...
you can imagine, it's not very easy for them to come forward
Right.
in light of what's happened. So I give them a lot of credit for their courage.
Question for John.
David, Howard
Sorry.
hasn't asked one yet. So
Well, we've mentioned this one case here in Somerset County. Do you know how big of a problem that this could be and how many cases it could be affecting?
I was asked that this morning by one of the other outlets, and as far as I'm concerned, one case is one case too many. So do we have data on how many cases like this have not been successfully prosecuted because of loophole? We don't have that data. But I think we all could agree that one case is one too many. David?
Question for John. In your experience as a trial lawyer and also the leader of the Republican Party in Trenton, what was your reaction when you realized that this loophole existed? Was this one of the weirder, kind of, honestly, stupider kinds of loopholes that you noticed down there?
It's very unfortunate, but when you pass a law that involves privacy, especially in light of early on in the AIDS epidemic, there was deep concern that releasing information about someone with AIDS was fundamentally unfair to that person, and we did what we could, I think, at that juncture to protect people's privacy. When you do that, you can never anticipate every possible effect. Interestingly enough, there are cases like this that the prosecutor has other evidence to prove that the person's infected without getting the records of the defendant himself or herself. So in this case, this was probably an exception that normally was not problematic in a prosecution.
the current case, is it now on appeal, going to another court, or is there any way that this can be settled where that person could be convicted, obviously without this bill here, but I mean, how could this current situation be resolved?
The Somerset County Prosecutor's Office feels so strongly about the case and the decision rendered at the Superior Court level, they have appealed it. It is at the appellate court level. As Senator Bateman said, this legislation will have no effect on that decision.
Other questions? Well, thank you all very much for coming out, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.